I'm Kristen Andre, founder and chief strategist of Andre Consulting Group. I founded my company almost 10 years ago because I love helping people not only succeed, but thrive in their careers and their lives. So many times I meet amazing people who have so much more potential than what they're utilizing. As I engage with them, there seems to be a common theme: the limits they place on themselves. Throughout this podcast series, we're going to visit some incredible people who have created more intentional lives for themselves, those who've had that no limits moment where they chose to grow and they put things in motion to help them do so. We will focus on how you can break through limits. We will equip you with strategies to help you lead a more intentional life, and we will have a lot of fun along the way. So let's dive in. Everybody, welcome to No Limits with Kristen Andre. We are here today with Danielle Cheung, who is a commercial banking executive here in the Atlanta area. So thank you for being with us.
You're welcome. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to have you. So you're in a cool industry. Obviously, I've got a pretty extensive history in the financial services world, as do you. Mm-hmm. But it's a fun industry, but it's tough.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is. I mean, I started my career about 24, I guess, years ago, and not really knowing what I was getting into. You know, you come out of college, right. You take a job that sounds really cool, and you go to do that job, and then you realize, gosh, you know, I'm in an industry that I know nothing about, and realized pretty quickly, because I started out as a healthcare banker, that I was one of very few women in this industry. Now, I was lucky enough to have a female boss at the time, and it was just her and I. And then it was all men. And so it was a really interesting industry to grow up in as a female.
It's a different industry for sure. A great one, but it's definitely different. Now, your road to getting to where you are, because you are, like we said, we're a high-level executive, which is fantastic. I mean, you've really risen the ranks over the years, but it wasn't easy for you. I mean, you have a pretty interesting story in terms of overcoming limits and challenges and adversity. So share with us kind of how you got to where you are.
Sure. And first, I should say, I think everybody has something that they overcome to get where they are, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So for me, it was interesting. I mean, I'm not a native to Atlanta. I was born and raised in New York.
We weren't getting that at all from the accent.
I get that a lot, right?
Yeah.
So, grew up in New York in a big, crazy family, a really fun Italian family. But, we started with some bumps. I mean, my dad made some choices when I was really young that wound up not being so great for our family. And, when it was right after my sister was born, so I was about 6, we found ourselves homeless and had to move in with some family. And luckily we had a lot of support, grandparents and all that. And so, from then on there, my parents never really had an easy road, whether with their marriage or just financially raising kids. My parents were really young when they had my sister and I, so it wasn't easy. Yeah. And, the one thing that really was what I think saved me was my mom was really focused on education. She had always wanted to go to college, never did. And that was her big thing for my sister and I. We have to go to college. We have to work hard. But at the same time, I knew that I wasn't going to college if I didn't have scholarship money. I had no choice.
It was on you. Yep.
My parents did the best they could to put us through good, grammar in high school, but I knew I was on my own. So really worked really hard. And I remember as a kid, like my mom would be in the kitchen and I would go in there and say like, well, what are you doing? What are you doing? She's like, go inside, go study. And so I really focused. I was a STEM kid, really focused on math and science, and which was unusual for girls in the 70s and 80s, right? Yeah, definitely. And so went to college on a full scholarship.
Awesome. Okay. So that hard work paid off.
It did pay off because I knew really that was my only way kind of out. And
I don't know that a lot of kids think through that because, especially it's not like that everywhere, but where we live, it's tough because there's just an expectation. Oh, I'm going to go to college. Parents are going to pay for it, or I'll take out loans. But kudos to you because you worked your booty off to study and get a scholarship.
Yeah, it wasn't, I guess looking back, I felt like I didn't have a choice. Now, it's interesting because my kids probably do have lots of choices that I didn't have. And I wonder if it's better or worse, right? Like, so for me, it was, okay, this is the answer. I've got to do it. It was the hurdle. I had to get there, had to do it. It was important. But for my kids, where there's so many choices, I wonder if it doesn't, maybe it doesn't make them work as hard. Carry as much weight.
Yeah.
So,
but I love the fact that your mom kind of imparted that on you, the importance of education, and because it seems like that's probably what pushed you to study.
It did. I mean, it was, and I remember I became so kind of over involved in education to the point where I remember one Friday night I was studying and my father came in and he closed the textbook and he said, "What friend's house can I drive you to? Because like you just can't study on a Friday night." Right. Yeah. My dad was obviously the fun one. Yeah. And so, so I pushed through. I mean, I went undergraduate on a full scholarship to university up in New York, and then started in my first banking job, where then they put me through grad school at night. Right. So about a year after I came out of undergrad, went back, did my MBA in the evening in finance, and really just committed to financial services. Now, what was interesting is I said, took a job that I had no idea what I was doing and loved it. Became a banker focused on the nonprofit and healthcare space, and did that for really 18 years. When I sort of hit a point, I had my 3 kids. I sort of knew that I was getting bored. I was really good at what I was doing. I still loved it, but I said, I need another challenge. Right. And, I was lucky enough along the way to have some really great people that took an interest in me that kind of helped me to that point where I was about to make that choice. And what I did was I made a choice to do something completely different. I left the sales position, which most people don't do, and I went into HR. And I can talk about that in a minute, but I want to talk about the women and men who along the way kind of helped me.
Yeah, that's
make
what I was
going to
ask, was that, because a lot of times we think of mentors and we tend to gravitate towards people like us, but in a male-dominated field, were your mentors and advocates people that were male and female?
A little bit of both. I remember early on, I had one of my first bosses was a man, and he just taught me some of the basics, right? About business. I didn't have that background. I was the first in my family to go to college, didn't really understand what it meant to succeed in a corporate environment. And I took many bruises and lessons along the way of things that I should have done differently, didn't do quite the right way. But
I think we all do that, though, especially even if no kid grows up in a corporate environment usually. Right. But it's hard to know what you're supposed to do when you first set out in the professional world.
I think the difference is, I've seen, because one of the things I did in HR was I ran recruiting. And so I saw some students that would come through and they had parents who had been in a corporate environment and they were just around it more. So they just had more kind of instinct of how and what to do. I'm not saying they didn't have bumps themselves, but I think there was a little more instinct. Like when I grew up, we didn't have, table seating, when you go to a nice restaurant or a fancy dinner. I was lucky enough when I was in college, there was someone who came over and said, okay, you've got to learn which fork to use, which glass is yours. And she sat me down and gave me a class.
It's, and it's something is fun. You hear that and you're like, it's, my daughter's my middle one is in the middle school age, and that's cotillion years here in the South.
We'll be doing it soon.
So for those of you guys listening, I loved it and my daughter fought me tooth and nail on going to cotillion. If you have children going to cotillion, mostly because she was going to have to wear a dress and that wasn't her thing. But the importance of it is they have table etiquette, and because there are a lot of forks. I know what they're for. I still don't understand why we need them all. Right. But it is something that you don't think about unless someone's taught you. And you go to a business dinner, a charitable event, or anything like that, and I still find myself, for those of you guys watching on live stream, doing this. Anybody know what this is? Mm-hmm. So when you're from a table etiquette standpoint, I'm holding up a B and a D in sign language, and it tells you which side's your bread plate and which side's your drink. And it I taught my kids that at an early age, but I could see people getting to a corporate environment and not having a clue.
Yeah, and so
do they just pull you aside and say, here's what we need to do?
Well, she took a few of us that were interns. I was working in an insurance company as an intern back then, and she took a few of us and said, you know what? I'm going to take you up to the corporate dining room and I'm going to show you guys what to do.
That's great.
And it was fantastic. And you don't realize how important those little things are along the way. That was probably one of the best coaching moments of my entire career. And then I was fortunate enough to be pulled out along with a few other women at my prior firm where they had two very strong senior women who'd had kind of reached the level, and said, okay, we're going to try to find more women to bring up and pull up. And then, that was a big deal at the time, because that was when companies were really first starting to focus on, we need more women in financial services. It's still an issue today that there are not enough women in financial services, and certainly not at the more senior management levels. And so these women pulled up about 15 or 20 of us high-performing women from around the Northeast where I was living at the time, and they said, we're going to sponsor you. And that's an amazing opportunity.
Yeah,
and the difference between a mentor and a sponsor, for those who don't know, is, mentor is great on giving advice, helpful hints. A sponsor will really advocate for you. And so when there was a few points in time where I had an opportunity to maybe try something different and get courted away by some other firms, those women came up and said, no, we need to keep her here. We need to get her in the right places. So those are some of the things that really made a difference over time, is having those women to fight for me.
Sponsor. And I think the sponsors they're hugely important. And, financial services, the area that both of us know, and I've done a lot of work in healthcare as well, but it's, you have to, two sides. One, you need to be, if you're at that level, you need to figure out who are the up and comers that I can pour into, invest my time in. But if you're not at that level and aspire to be at those senior management levels, you've got to seek those people out. I mean, the hope is within a company that they're going to put programs and things in place, which we're starting to see more. I think 20 years ago, when we both were, starting out careers, it wasn't as common.
That's right.
Now I'm starting to see more formalized programs and people really helping women and other diverse, high-performing talent come up in the world. So, did you see, seeking them out, I think, is where, that's scary when somebody's young.
Right. Yeah. And, I looked at it as a great opportunity, but I could see where some other women would be a little bit more nervous. But to me, it was, okay, I've been chosen to do something great, and I've got to do it, right? Yep. And so what I'm trying to do now is do the same thing for women that I see along the path, because my feeling is, if you get pulled up, your responsibility is to then reach down and pull somebody else up. Yep. And you mentioned a lot of these corporate programs. I mean, the financial institution that I work for now is fantastic. I mean, their diversity and inclusion programs are industry, top in the industry. It's fantastic. However, I don't think that that's enough, right? The formalized programs are great. They get, a number of women, in the right training programs in front of the right people. But it's about, how do we give them those individualized insights to help them personally succeed? And so I've got about 12 or so women and a couple men that I work with on a regular basis, some as sponsors, some as mentors, that I have molded. And sometimes that's not just, hey, you're doing a great job. Sometimes it's, I don't think you're doing a great job, and here's what you need to do to change this.
Work on it. Yeah.
And that's hard. I mean, there are some folks who, the first time, and I'm very blunt and I'm very open, because I feel like when you're giving feedback, people need to hear exactly what they're doing wrong. And again, this is just my opinion, right? My experienced opinion, because some of these things have been said to me along the way, right?
Yeah,
and I'm glad they were.
Yeah.
And that's, sometimes hard to hear, but at the end, a lot of these individuals will come back to me and say, okay, I really needed that. Yeah. And sometimes they need to find their voice. Sometimes they need to learn not to be perceived as so aggressive, and how to tone it down. I mean, there's all and everything in between. And sometimes it's just learning to advocate for themselves.
And I think that's a big thing. And we're going to pause for a second, take a short break. And when we come back, we're going to dive a little bit more into how we, as members of society, can help others bring them up, or how we may seek help ourselves. So we'll be right back in just a few. Hey everyone, it's Kristen. Be sure and visit my website at www.andregroup.com. That's www.andree group.com. And while you're there, be sure to download my white paper, Top 10 Reasons Your Business Isn't Growing Fast Enough. Now get out there and create your no limits moment. Welcome back, everyone, to No Limits with Kristen Andre. We are here with Danielle Cheung. And before the break, we were talking about, especially in the financial services world, but honestly, any industry that we're looking at, the importance of helping others and bringing others up. And, you know, when I started when I took over one of the offices, I was managing director for my former firm. And when I went to that office, the partner who had been there and since retired, one of the things he told me, and he used to say this all the time, he's like, somebody helped you when you were new. And my expectation is you do the same thing when you get to where you want to be. And so that kind of always, in his whole office, the office I had the great opportunity to work in, that they all had that philosophy.
Right.
They were taught from day one, we will help you when you're brand new, but our expectation is when you get to that level, you're turning around and helping pull somebody up. And it was a great culture to be in because that was just, everybody did it. It was just natural. And I think it was, I hate to say unusual, but I do think it is unusual for a lot of companies and industries now to really have that in place. So, I mean, you do it naturally. I mean, that's part of your job, but bringing up people behind you, what can people do? I mean, first of all, what are we getting wrong? What are we not doing in society, in corporate America today that we could be doing to help others more?
So I actually think corporate America, and I can only share it from my viewpoint, right? From the financial service sector, having worked at two of the largest banks in the world, I think we're doing it right. Right. I think we're trying to do a lot of the right things, right? We're promoting. So, for example, my firm currently gives 16 weeks maternity and paternity leave.
Oh, that's awesome.
I mean, that's amazing.
That's huge.
You know, when I had my daughter, I got 12 weeks, which at the time was also revolutionary.
Yeah.
So I think firms are trying to do that, give more flex time, give better paternity, maternity leaves. I think they're trying to put programs in place that get women over the hurdle.
Okay.
Right. And there is a hurdle in financial services where women get to a certain level and then they stop.
Yep.
And it's not because the firm is stopping them. And I'm sure the glass ceiling is still out there and exists in certain ways.
Yeah.
But in a lot of the research that I did, especially when I was in HR, one of the things we realized was that it was more that we were losing women who were self-selecting out. Yep. I don't want to do what it takes to get to that next level. And sometimes that is a perceived hurdle, and sometimes it's a real hurdle. And so that's where I'm trying to focus my time and where a lot of companies are trying to focus their time. So, for example, my current firm did some research around at the 10-year mark is when we're losing a lot of people, 10 years into their career. So now our section of the bank has a sabbatical program where when you hit the 10-year mark, you can take a paid sabbatical.
Okay.
Right? And it's, 4 weeks where you can take a vacation, spend time at home, go do a volunteer project, whatever it may be. So
I think that's fantastic. I think companies I have a friend of mine from high school, actually, and he works for a sporting good company and out on the West Coast, and he's been there 20 years, and he just took I think it was 5 weeks. I can't remember exactly, but he got to travel and do all this, and it just seemed, he's so tenured in his career right now. He could have taken some time off, but it was just a great way to show him that we appreciate you. We want you to have a lot of balance and experiences.
That's
and
right.
He traveled all over the place. It was awesome.
Yeah. So I think companies are doing more of that, right?
Okay.
Trying to find ways to keep employees, not just women, but all employees engaged, give them opportunities to have better balance between their home life and their work life. I think now the challenge, and this is what I'm trying to take up, is how do we personally help those women who hit that point and despite all of the framework that's in place, still opt out or still can't get there. And that's, I think, more individualized. And I've taken that up as a challenge where we have to show women that there is not a limit. Right? I mean, the limit is self-imposed, and sometimes it's fear, sometimes it's lack of confidence in themselves, sometimes it's, I don't know that I want to put in what it takes, and helping them understand what that looks like.
Sure.
And that they can still have what they want personally and achieve. So it's hard. It's hard.
It's a tough balance. I mean, I love it that the no limits. We got to help them understand that, but it's a tough balance because as you're talking, I'm sitting here thinking, when I exited from the financial services industry, for me, I always tell people you need to be running towards something, not away from something. So for me, the opportunities on the entrepreneurial side to launch my own firm was a stronger pull. Did I have limits that I was facing in financial services as a female? Without question.
Yep.
Absolutely. Were some of them perceived versus real? Probably, definitely. But it's just it's for somebody like me who's not afraid to put in the hard work, at least from the women that I've seen that have exited, frequently what I'll hear is, I was putting it in, I don't mind putting it in, but I've got to put in this much more to for a potential. So it kind of, it's interesting dynamic, and not all firms have what your banks have had the opportunity to provide that they've got. So I think that's, kudos to them for having the sabbatical program, the maternity and paternity leave. That's
right.
I think for corporations, if they're not, for those of you guys listening who are in senior positions at corporations that don't have these opportunities, you got to get it together.
Right.
Or you're exactly right. You're going to lose people.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think the other big difference is, when I first started, I was successful because I kind of I figured out how to play the game.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
I learned the rules. And the rules were mostly rules created by men. And I'm not knocking that. It's just because that was an industry that was dominated by men from the creation, right?
Yeah.
And so...
we had 2 females in my office when I started.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I learned to play the game, and I was successful. The big difference now is that many of the firms, you don't have to play the game. They don't want you to play the game. Right. There is no game. They have created equality, which I love.
Love. I do too, because it's a vastly different industry than it was 20 years ago when I started. And I am so excited to see that. And the women who are in banking, who are in finance, and advisory services that I know, it's so cool to kind of watch those old rules fade away and just rules that work for everyone kind of start to come up. So,
Absolutely.
All right. So let me ask you this: we've talked about mentoring for corporate America and people that are in larger companies, but a lot of the people listening, we have a lot of folks that engage with us on our group online that are entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. That maybe they're out doing it by themselves or in a teeny little firm who's not going to have a formalized program. How do they get this mentorship and feedback that's been so critical to your success and others?
So I think there's a lot of places to look. It's just a matter of being open to it and knowing where to look. Okay. So first and foremost, I think it's just having a strong advocate. That advocate could be outside your business. It could be a family member. It could be a friend, someone who's sort of your personal cheerleader and coach, right?
Yeah. Yep. So
it doesn't have to be, it could be another female entrepreneur, but there's also organizations that have programs in place. So, there's associations for small business owners where you can go and get education and find people that will help bring resources. I know a lot of the larger financial services firms have programs for entrepreneurs,
right,
where you can go and get coached on what it takes to be bankable, what it takes to succeed in your business. So I think it's having not as discriminating of an eye, and I don't mean just take anybody that you see, but it doesn't have to be the person that you think. It doesn't have to be the other successful entrepreneur. It can be, but it may be, just someone who really understands how you work and what you need from a cheering perspective, a coaching perspective to be successful. And there are obviously professional business coaches out there which you can pay to help you. So there's a lot of different resources. I think it's just seeking them out and being open to something that may look a little different or unusual than what you expected.
Yeah. And I think, what do you feel like with like, I have a lot of, I have a coach, I have friends, I have study groups, have all that. So I feel like I naturally do that because I crave the feedback. Do I always agree with the feedback? No. Mm-hmm. None of us do. Right. But and sometimes it's tough to hear, but there's no way I would be able to run my business and execute at the levels I do and do all the things I do if I didn't have those group of people. So my personal bias is you can't hit your stride and you can't reach the levels that you should or that you're meant to be without help. I mean, what do you agree?
I mean, I think life is a long road and it has to be a group effort, right?
Yeah.
I mean, no one gets where they are alone.
Right.
I mean, no matter what the hurdles that you have to overcome, there's somebody each time. I mean, I've gone through some different things in my life. I mean, my parents were ill. I mean, I had my sister, I had my other family members, I had my husband, right? So there's always somebody who is there to help you. And I feel like sometimes we as women try to push through on our own.
Right.
And that's, I think, where we fall, because that's hard. It's really hard to just go it alone, especially when you're tripping and you're making mistakes. You need someone to help pick you up, give you that boost of energy to move you forward. And so I'm really big on seeking out others and relying on what they say. Now, to your point, you don't always agree with the feedback that you get.
Right.
But sometimes you have to decide, do you not agree with it because it's not going to work for you, or do you not agree with it because it's hard to hear? And
it's usually you don't agree with it because it's hard to hear, at least for me, because I'll get feedback. And I know for me, and this happened this past week, that when I get feedback that I'm cringing inside, that I'm like, you don't know what you're talking about. You must be crazy. It's probably the most truthful feedback I've gotten. And it takes me a day or so to go, dang it, they were right.
They were right.
Yeah.
Well, and feedback is not about what we think.
Right.
We always think, the best about ourselves.
Yeah.
It's about how you're perceived. And sometimes you could have the best motivation, you could have the best intent, and it comes out the wrong way. And that's why we need others to show us that.
And the big opportunity we have is finding the right people to do that.
That's right.
So we're going to pause for a minute. When we come back, we're going to talk about exactly that, how to find the right people in your life, both personally and professionally, that can help you push past limits. We'll be back in just a few. Hey everyone, check out my podcast, No Limits with Kristen Andre, on Tuesday nights at 7:30. We will tackle the things holding you back and the limits you set on yourself and equip you with some strategies to lead more intentional lives. Podcast launches every Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. on facebook.com/Andre Group. That's facebook.com/ANDREE Group. We'll see you there. Welcome back, everyone, to No Limits with Kristen Andre. We are wrapping up our time with Danielle Cheung, I'm saying it again, commercial banking executive. So thanks for spending time with us today.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, so we were talking before we took a little break about the importance of having somebody to give us feedback, having that mentor, having that advocate. So how do we find them?
So I think we have to not think about the usual suspects, right? It's easy to go to your spouse, your sibling, your best friend, but sometimes they've got too much of a vested interest in you succeeding, and it's hard to see.
Yeah.
Just like we sometimes can't see things in ourselves.
Yep.
So you have to choose somebody, and it could be your spouse or your friend.
Yeah. My brother and my best friend probably give me more direct feedback than anybody on the planet. Shame on you guys, making it tough on me here.
Right.
But not everybody does.
Right.
You're right. Most people might sugarcoat things.
And sometimes you can ask, right? I mean, if you work in a company, there are formal mentoring programs, or you can ask and say, gee, I really need someone who can work with me, give me feedback. It may be friends of friends that you've met that you just clicked with, like when I met you, we just kind of clicked. So I think it's about finding someone that you feel is interested in helping you succeed, but not too close that they can't see your faults either.
Right.
And that's what's important. And so I think it's, you'll meet people along the way through your personal life, through your corporate life, through networking, through your kids' school, other moms and dads. And so, there's plenty of opportunity to get out there and find people. It's just having the discriminating eye as to who you think is really going to be that person that can help get you through those hurdles.
And who has a genuine interest in you. Because it's interesting because I feel like as a coach, my private clients, they're paying me to give them feedback. That's what they do. And I think that's a great resource for people that are able to do that.
That's right.
But what, on the other side of it is I also, I'm a coach, so I coach people. I have a coach, but I also have people just like you said, in my life that I bump into. I'm like, you know what, those are my kind of people. And it's not really a formal arrangement. I've said this on the show before, for those of you guys that listen frequently, is I call it my Energizer list. And I have a list of, 20, 25 people. It changes. I add people all the time. But my goal with my Energizer list is they're people that I truly get energy from. But subsequently, they're all people who will give direct feedback. It's not all rah-rah, things are great, you're perfect. It's people that I love them, they love me. We have a great vested interest in each other. And my goal with my Energizer list is one of them has to be on my calendar every week, for coffee, for a phone call, for drinks, for whatever. But that just kind of keeps me, one, happy and motivated, because we all have those bad weeks. But two, it gives me an opportunity to kind of bounce ideas off people and them to do the same with me. So it's hugely helped a lot in kind of just stand a little more even keel, I think, with feedback and stuff.
Right. Yeah. And just remember, I look at it this way. I feel like people come into our lives for a reason.
Yep. Sometimes
it's to help us. Sometimes it's to teach us a lesson. And people come and go. Yep. There are some great people that have been in my life that unfortunately are not in my life for different reasons.
Sure.
But you learn something from everybody along the way, whether that's, an opportunity to grow, a lesson that you maybe could have done things differently.
Yep.
And what's important is being there for the feedback and using that to help you take it to the next level, whatever that level may be, personally and professionally.
And I think that's huge, because not all the time it's positive.
That's
sometimes, and same thing with experiences. We've all had experience we'd rather forget, but they shape us into the people we are. And I think growth happens when you allow those things and you take the lessons from them. Mm-hmm. So every episode we issue a challenge to our listeners. And we've got a great group on Facebook. If you guys want to join us there, it's at #NoLimitsMoment. And we'd like you to join in the conversation, because this is a community of people trying to push past limits. And we're super excited. We got some great people that follow and comment all the time. So it's a lot of fun. But our challenge this week, what do you think? What are we throwing out to them, Miss Danielle?
I think we want each person to just find that one person and just name them, right? Make sure that person knows who they are.
That's key. They need to know.
Right. Yep. And say, approach them and say, I really want you to help me, whatever that is, whatever the next challenge is for you, and ask them if they will be the person to guide you, and then share with us about, how the conversation went. How's it going?
Yeah.
What are they going to help you get to? What are you going to achieve?
Yeah. So who's your person? I think that's the big thing, is we all need help, personally and professionally. And I think it could be both. So challenge to you guys this week is find your person. Who's the person that's going to be your advocate, your mentor, or your sounding board to help you push past the limits and get to that next level. So Danielle, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
I appreciate
this is great.
I appreciate you being here. So until next week, join us on Facebook. If I can talk today, Facebook at #NoLimitsMoment, and keep pushing. We'll see you soon.